Devlog number 27. I've had a busy 3 weeks working pretty hard to get kind of just one thing done. Usually I end up with my attention split all over the place and doing lots of different things, but these last 3 weeks I kind of just focused on getting one thing done, and that thing is a scenario editor. I got my usual fixes for all the little bugs I saw in the last video, and a couple of more little things like that, but most of my time has been spent on this screen up here. It's going to look a little different. So I still have all the buttons over here with the lists of stuff in them. There's some new icons and stuff. Map still does nothing. But the most obvious difference here is... That's right, I can scroll this with the right stick. Most obvious difference here is now I have this big list of warnings. So I talked about this before. This kind of functions as an automatically generated to-do list to show me all the little unfinished pieces in the scenario that I'm looking at. So basically I have a bunch of status effects that are defined but not used and aren't really finished. And a cool thing about this is I can go in here and select this. This works pretty much just like the battle event view, whatever I call that thing, where it shows you, Warrior 1's turn, attacked, imp, etc. So yeah, using a lot of the same UI code for that. I can select a particular line here, and so this one's about the haste spell effect. If I click here, it takes me to the spells pop-up and highlights the haste line. The highlight there is in case I'm doing this with the mouse and I don't have the menu cursor over there showing me what I'm looking at. So this shows it anyway. So yeah, this takes me straight into the spells here to show me, hey, this is the one I'm talking about. If you want to change it here. So the idea is like if I'm working on a scenario and I'm like, well, what does this need? Okay, here are the warnings I'm getting. Bleed status ticks but has no tick sound. All right, I want to add a tick sound. So I click here and I'm there at the bleed status. Unfortunately, if I click here, it doesn't actually do anything at the moment. But that's fine. Anyway, yeah, so it analyzes this automatically and does all sorts of cool things. Let's look at a different scenario. Test scenario 2, no, I haven't shown that, and I haven't decided whether I'm going to yet or not, so I'll keep it as it is. Showcase scenario. The one being built for the purpose of being shown on YouTube. Yeah, Fortify has no sound assigned. Fortify is an ability, and unfortunately I can't edit the sound right now. So this is a little underwhelming because I can't do anything about these specific warnings that I'm getting. Shoot has no sound assigned. Shoot has no visual effect. Shoot spell effect has no visual effect assigned. Yeah, so those, I mean, you can probably understand what these mean. If you remember back to when I was, well, here, let's actually look at this. So if I go to the showcase scenario, and open this up and say, what is this setup? Let's just clear that. Okay, so like add protector, add archer, whatever. Why would I not put you on the energy sigil? Haven't messed with this specific part of my game in a little while, so it's nice to see it still seems to work just fine. Look at that tiny little icon being used as portrait for this champion. That looks bad. Also, this text barely fits in there. Yeah, like if this short of text barely fits in this space, I'm going to have to do something about this. This is insufficient as it is. Don't know what yet, though. Right, okay, yeah, so this is attack that thing, sure. So like if I were to fortify targets self, that's fine. Just wanted to show... So you'll do shoot, and then you'll do volley. So yeah, what the warnings are telling me about is that, whoa, okay, yeah, I changed the graphics on these a little bit. They're different. I'm not entirely sure they're better, but they're different. Spent 4 energy. Used ability fortify. Yeah, so that didn't make any noise. It didn't make any visual effect. Receiving the status doesn't make any noise or anything. So yeah, the recommendation of the, like those have effects and stuff. The recommendation of the scenario editor is to assign effects and sounds for everything that happens. So it's going to basically treat that as not exactly an error. The scenario will still load and you can play it without these things, but it's like, you should polish this up. You should really put sounds and visual effects for these things. Energy has a change formula, but no change sound. Yeah, okay, so the same thing. Like the energy resource will charge automatically every turn. So if you don't assign a sound or visual effect to, let's say, health changing, since it doesn't change automatically. That's fine. That's just something that won't be shown in the game. But yeah, so it knows, hey, energy changes, but it doesn't tell you about it. It doesn't have any effects for it. Stat effect, attack, defined but not used. Now this one I can actually look at. There are no encounters that award scenario completion. Let's see, this line just doesn't do anything. I can click it, but nothing happens. Because there isn't a specific place to point you at. It's just some encounter in here is going to need to get the scenario completion awards, so that the scenario can be completed. Whoa, okay, slight UI confusion here. I click here, thereby forcing my menu cursor to be there. However, this still thinks it has focus locked. I don't like this focus lock thing. I should get rid of it. You should just be able to, like, button over to, yeah, so focus lock is like, if I press this and then press left, it doesn't escape out of the bounds of that. So I can press down and it scrolls. Well, there's no scroll bar in this one. It just happens that these warnings fit exactly in the window. Still thinking about what to do about that. UI is complicated, and this game is like 95% UI code. And that's what I've been doing, lots and lots of UI code. So like, this thing took a couple of days or so in its current form. The bulk of my time was being spent on actually making this editor let me edit stuff. So I started with, let's go out of here and into something I just discovered playing around. Let's see, I can't show this super easily. Okay, I'll do it with a debug build. I just noticed something extremely satisfying in here. So like this debug build that I'm running, debug Win32, contains the executable, resources, everything the game needs to run. Oh, Windows, you're going to get all confused because there are OGG files in there, so you think, oh, this must be a folder full of music, and you want to know the title and contributing artists. Thanks, Windows. Anyway, so all the files needed to run the game. If I were to zip this up, to debug Win32.zip, this is a debug build, so it has some extra symbols and stuff in it, but this makes a file that's under 3 megabytes. That makes me extremely satisfied. I made a very compact little game here. It won't necessarily stay that way. If I decide to have music in like OGG format, that's, you know, minutes of audio data, that will increase the size a lot, but right now I'm just very happy to have something so compact. I didn't think it was that small, and like a release build would be much smaller, because that is mostly, I believe that is mostly executable code. Yeah, so 7 megabytes uncompressed in the executable. Less than a megabyte for all of the resources. Neat. Anyway, I like to make small things, and I'm happy with the smallness of this project right now. Anyway, so right, spent my time trying to get. I popped out of full screen mode for a reason there. I want to go to. The organization of all of this has changed a bit. So this is now scenario data.h. It's a lot better than it was. Still kind of complicated. Yeah, so I have this super monster file here, scenario data.c. How many lines is this? It is 5748. This does not give me a pleasant sense of smallness. This is kind of a gargantuan monster. But it has to be that way because scenario data does a lot. Anyway, yeah, so this file defines all of the things for like every data structure to do with the entire scenario. So like an equipment record, you know, has an identifier, display name, icon, all of these things. So the scenario editor, as I'm implementing it, yeah, that's right, I have that to do in there. I'll get to that inventory stuff. The scenario editor, as I'm implementing it right now, is pretty much a one-to-one mapping with these struct fields. So I decided that it would make the most sense to start with the simplest ones. For example, champion property type record has nothing but identifier, display name, and icon. It just so happens that this structure is identical to stat types and equipment slot types. Because these are basically like leaf nodes of a sort. They don't reference any other data in the scenario. They just exist to be referenced by something else. Like a champion property, is something I need to be able to point at and say, hey, you have the energized property, but the energized property doesn't do anything on its own. It may be used by a formula, like for example, the energy change formula, to say, well, if you're energized, then I'm going to charge by 1 more per turn or whatever it does. But yeah, the property does nothing on its own, so it just exists and has an appearance and a way to identify itself. Appearance consists of icon and name. So yeah, one-to-one mapping between struct fields and things to edit in the editor. And I went ahead and implemented champion stats, equipment slots, and properties because they were easy. Then I tried for a harder one, and I can edit resource types. So let's look at stat types. So we have vitality, attack, and defense. Stat attack defined but not used. So for each one of these, I can make a new stat. Champion stat name, sure, whatever. That's its name now. Has no icon by default. The identifier is automatically generated by what I enter in that text field. So it just like lowercases it and replaces spaces with underscores and stuff. So, hi, I'm a new stat. Gets the identifier. Hi, I am a new stat. This is the same way that scenario identifiers are assigned, which I've already shown. And I can edit these just in case you care, like what shows up in your file. The reason I think it's necessary to be able to edit these is just because, like, I can imagine a situation where somebody is just playing around in the scenario editor, like, oh, okay, I'm going to type this thing, and because of the mood that I'm in, I'm going to put some swear words into the name. I'll change it later. Then they go and change the display name later, but unbeknownst to them, their swear words they put in the name stuck around invisibly in the identifier. So anybody who digs into the scenario file would see their, like, past embarrassment or whatever. You know, just thinking about stuff like that. I feel like any freeform text that's entered needs to be editable. I don't want it to just be set in stone forever. Even though this doesn't show up to a player of the game ever. But I guess, well, yeah, again, if you open this in the scenario editor, you'd be able to see the identifier, but only because I made it editable, sorry. Well, no, that's not true. Everything else would have to refer to, well... Anyway, I think the reasoning makes sense. Right, so here's the name. I can edit this. And it updates there, it does all the things it needs. It even is smart enough to do stuff like, say I put a really wide name in here. It'll automatically update the layout of that. And I don't love the way this window moves around to accommodate, but it kind of has to. Because, like, what else am I going to do? What's the threshold? Okay, I found it. You know, it looks a lot better if I'm just changing width without this, like, changing position on the screen. I did think about, like, I could have this window get wider and have this, since when this window popped up, it had decided to attach on the right side of this. I could keep that decision around and say that it stays on the right, but this can overlap behind it potentially. Because what looked really bad was when I changed the name to something narrower and didn't update the position of this, and, like, this would be attached to nothing way out here with a big gap in between these two. So that's why I changed it that way. But yeah, I'm not sure I want to allow it to change sides like that. Anyway, icon. So I have this little icon picker view here. No icon is this. The UI is just something I threw together. I might decide to change it. So that sort of gray frame, I don't like gray. I should choose a different color for that. Something a little brighter and cheerier, I guess. So this is no icon. All the rest of these are just... Ooh, I don't like the way that menu cursor's overlapping there. When I put the mouse over the position of the menu cursor should go away no matter what input mode I'm in. Okay, that's a note for me. I'm going to fix that. That'll be better. Anyway, yeah, so this automatically generates a list of icons based on everything that is in... Actually, what it does is... so I've shown how my atlases are put together before. Let's take another look at it. So in here, like I have the... oh boy, what is this? Texture packer config.json. So this is the basic one, the one that is just built into the game and is not specific to any scenario. What this does is it just looks through the list of Atlas entries and takes anything with the icon prefix and decides, well, that looks like an icon, so I'm going to make it available to pick. And it mixes together this list of icons with the list of whatever scenario I'm looking at. So that would be this one in this case. So it gets all these icons as well. If I were to exit that scenario and go over to my test scenario, for example, and look at an icon picker here. Sure, yeah, this will do fine. You'll notice there's a bunch of different stuff here. Like here's the imp that only exists in test scenario. And yeah, ooh, I don't like the way that looks. It's like especially bad right there in this icon picker scenario. Maybe I don't need the menu pointer since I have the little outline there. Maybe this is a case where that's actually doing more harm than good, pointing at my current thing. Because yeah, that looks really, really bad. Huh. Like if I'm just using the mouse, I'm doing this mixture of mouse and gamepad. Like if as soon as I click on something, the pointer goes away entirely until I make a gamepad input, and it does that. Okay, well, this is my to-do that I'm giving myself. Anyway, yeah, so different list of icons here than I had back here. Let me go back to where I was, so I don't lose my place too much. www, AAAA. So yeah, I can change the icon. It's a fist now. It's a new now. It's a silent speaker now. It's a little starry thing. If I were to change here, let's actually change a more interesting one that's actually used. So your name is Vitality. Your icon is now going to be 3 boxes. And I'm going to move you down. Yes, okay, that's correct. So now if I go into here and look at, say, a champion's stats. So attack is now on top. Previously, if I had looked at this, vitality would have been listed first. So I can change the order that they would show up in a place like this. Oh, hey, this does show www. That's right, because every champion in the scenario automatically gets every stat that is assigned. And I guess it just default the value to 0 for new ones. Sure. Not using any formula because it's newly created, used by physical, used by health, not used in any formula. That's what the editor was warning me about. So yeah, icon change propagates, name change propagates. Still nothing is written to disk just yet. That's weirdly low priority for this. It's going to become important when it becomes important, but it's not yet. Just because this editor is not at the point where I'm making changes that I want to commit to my files on disk. And this particular file is at the moment just built into the... Ooh. Yeah, okay, so a big component I'm missing is like a place on the player's disk to keep custom scenarios other than the ones that are built into the game. Because this one just lives in the game resources directory. And to be a good citizen for like disk permissions and stuff, you really don't want to write files to a directory next to the application. These would need to go Windows. Fine, I'll just deal with you as you are. Anyway, yeah, so showcase scenario.json is in here. And yeah, for all intents and purposes, I have to treat this as a read-only location. So I need another place on disk like C app data or whatever it is, program data, user's home directory, some place like that to store files related to things they've created and modified. I'll get there. Anyway, but yeah, so I can change things in memory and this all works. I can reorder, I can even delete. Let's talk about deleting. Deleting's complicated. So if I were to delete the vitality stat, permanently delete this champion stat and all references to it. Yes. That's actually pretty complicated in what it does. It can remove kind of a lot of stuff. Basically everything in the scenario that references a stat. What would that be for a stat? Okay, so like a champion configuration. Oh shoot, I didn't do the cursor thing. You know what, let's do it right now. Check it out. I'm going to make my cursor visible. Control panel. How do I do this? It's like themes. Oh dear, what am I doing? No, it's mouse. Yeah, so this is what I have to go through every startup. So I have this custom cursor that I made that looks like that. It's set as the thing, but I have to go and like actually, yeah, so it wants to be in here. But my actual one is in... Hope this doesn't mess up OBS, since it's recording and probably like, you know, knows something about the cursor. I can't resize this window. Half this video is going to be me being baffled by how Windows works. Is it in Documents? I think it is. Whoops. ibeam outline.cur, apply. Okay, there we go. And now I have a visible cursor. Neat. Yeah, so that has an outline on it. I have to do that every time I start up my computer because it forgets it. I don't know how to make it remember. Anyway, but it's only specifically necessary when I'm recording a video where I want to show my text editor. But I still have to remember to do it there. So yeah, so a champion configuration, or a champion record, in fact, doesn't refer to stats by identifier, but it just has an array of them with values in here. So if I delete a stat out of the master stat list, I have to go into every champion record that exists and shuffle these values around in this array so that they still line up with the lists of the... what's all this whiteness? Oh, it's what I had selected. Okay, sure. Yeah, like stat bonuses on equipment is indexed the same way. Formulas that talk about stats all have to be updated. So it was surprisingly complicated to delete something out of a scenario if that thing might be in use. Let me see if I can find... Let's see, this will be like remove... Yeah, okay, so remove resource and spelling page. Just to give you a little taste of what it looks like. But yeah, so remove champion stat type. Find the index in the scenario. If not found, do nothing. Free memory is necessary. So yeah, there's one fewer stats in the scenario now. Shuffle everything in that array back by one. And then go through all the champions. Shuffle everything in their stats array back by one. Go through all the equipment. If it requires any stats, shuffle those. If it has any stat bonuses, shuffle those. By shuffle, I just mean like, you know, delete from the middle. Not shuffle. I'm using the word wrong. Same for spells with required stats. Spells with required stats. Yeah, of course they do. That makes sense. Items with required stats. Status effects. Right, yeah. So if the status effect has entirely to do with that stat, then that status effect has to be deleted because it just can't refer to nothing. So if I had a status effect for the purpose of buffing attack, for example, and I delete attack, then that's what I mean by all references to it. That thing will be deleted. So I have it to do right here. I just happen to have landed on this. What I'd like to do is add to this dialogue a list of everything that will be affected so that you know, hey, if you delete this thing that's core to your scenario, you're going to lose all of this other data. And I think that's pretty important to warn about, because right now it's like, well, what does that mean? What's that going to delete? Lots of stuff, potentially. Anyway, yeah, so like tries to remove the status effect if it needs to. And that's a whole complicated thing, because then removing the status effect has cascading effects where there are things that might reference that status effect that need to be updated or deleted. It's a whole thing. So yeah, that's nuances like that are why this is kind of complicated and takes a while. But anyway, so right, I can change identifier, name, and icon. I can copy. Uh-oh. No, I can't. I got a crash. All right, so copying has a crash somewhere. That's not going to give me a stack trace, but at least I have it on video, so I know the steps that I took. I can probably reproduce that. I'll use my imagination for what caused that crash. Doesn't surprise me too much. Let's go to test scenario. Okay, so anyway, a copy might be buggy. Like I can probably do it from a fresh startup. Yeah, okay. So health max copy, that's fine. But I don't need to hear. Okay, so anyway, let's go to resource types, because that's more exciting, because those are more complicated. A champion resource involves a lot more stuff. Champion resource type record. So it has the identifier, display name, and icon, just like those others I was editing. But it has a default state, vitalness, I guess, spend mode, formulas, colors, sounds, and visual effects. I did manage to get editing implemented for everything except the formulas. So those are going to be complicated, but everything else here can be fully edited. So yeah, I can do the identifier, I can do the name, I can do the icon. Those are all familiar enough. So default to full. What does this mean? Right, so this means for player champions newly added to the battlefield, because enemy champions in their encounter configuration can have their resource values assigned. They can also say just get the default, but no scenario data has to do with how player champions start with their resources. So you can either start with empty or start with full. So like if I had some kind of resource whose design was that it starts empty, but anger or something. You enter every battle calm, you get angrier and angrier, then you can spend anger on some kind of like adrenaline-fueled abilities or something. Anyway, so that's when I would want default to empty and have like a change formula that charges up when I take damage or when I take my turn or something. Anyway, so that's what that's for. Is vital. Right, so health is vital, energy is not vital. If you deplete your energy, you won't necessarily die. Or you could configure it to do that. You could say if you run out of magic, then you die from something other than like blood loss or whatever. Spend below 0, spend above 0, spend to 0. This has to do with like if there are spells that require this as a resource for casting them. I think it makes sense that energy is a resource you have to have. You can spend it all the way to 0, but you have to have the amount that you're spending to do anything with it. But for a spell that costs health, I think it makes a lot of sense. Just like game mechanic wise, that if you have 1 health and there's an ability that costs 100 health, you can totally do it. You can spend 100 health and end up at negative 99, like super dead, but still get the ability off. So that one will kill you, but you can spend it below 0. Or you could say, here's an ability that costs health that you cannot kill yourself with. So spend above 0. So if it costs 10 and you have 10, you can't do it. If it costs 10 and you have 11, you can do it and you'll be left with 1. So that's what the spend mode is. Capacity formula, change formula. Yeah, I don't have a formula editor yet. I'll hold off on color for a moment. Let's look at sounds. Yeah, this list looks great. So sounds don't have human-readable names. They just have machine-readable identifiers. They're human-readable enough. Problem is there are way too many sounds to fit on screen. So I've put off implementing scrolling in this list about as long as I reasonably can. Let's make this sound like screenshots. Let's make this sound like slow. Let's make it sound like start encounter. Ugh, that noise that I really don't like. Oh, hey, that's one that we haven't heard in the encounters I've shown yet. Whoops. Anyway, yeah, so that's what it would sound like when you spend that resource. However, I'm not being warned about this because this warning analyzer knows enough not to say, knows enough to detect that no spell costs health to spend, therefore I don't need a spend sound assigned to health. At the top of this list where you can't see, there is a no sound option, so I can do that and just put it on none. Anyway. So yeah, and this changes to that icon if there's an actual sound assigned. Visual effect. So yeah, if you're spending it, I should have a preview of some sort for these. Ooh, that changed the whole window size. Yeah, it works, but it surprised me. Yeah, I should have a preview for these. I have the type of visual effect in the icon here, and I have the color for the ones that have colors, but you don't really know what these look like. Okay, yeah, so sound preview was easy to do. I just play the sound when you select it. Anyway, yeah, so then copy, delete, move down and up. There's no move up because it's at the top. Color. This is what I've been doing for the last few days. Color picker. I said the words last time. Color picker's easy. I can implement that, no problem. It was easy, but it still was a lot of work. So I have a nice color picker here that looks good. It's missing a few things. I could have like, red slider, green slider, blue slider. If I wanted separate saturation and value sliders, maybe, so you don't have to adjust both at once. And oops, I moved my cursor slightly up when I just wanted to darken this. And, and this is just the hex value. So like magenta. There we go. I press enter and it automatically corrects. I like uppercase. You can do it in lowercase or upper if you want. You can do it in mixed case, whatever. It'll correct it, and I barely changed that at all. That's green, etc. Hue slider works, and this updates live as I move things around. Yeah, so this was real satisfying to implement. Sure, so let's look at this. So I'll give a real saturated blue for that. Deplete color is going to be, let's make it dark gray. No saturation, just that. Restore color is going to be cyan, full saturation. Okay, and I'm editing health, sure. So now I updated those. I can go back and play this. And so now those are laser blue. So when this depletes, it's going to be, what did I say, gray? Yeah, so now that's gray. That'll deplete in gray. And it'll restore in cyan. And there we go. So those changes do actually apply. Yeah, so a lot of other little things that I did, just tiny stuff, like I made the button anti-aliasing nicer. It was bothering me, so just took a moment and did that. I had, oh man, as part of implementing this color picker, I discovered this kind of horrifying thing. Oh, I need to change a thing here because this cursor is always visible because this thing always has focus. Because it does, so it's covering up part of my hue slider. Ooh. Oh, yeah, and if I click anywhere that doesn't register as a click zone, it just closes the dialog. I should make clicking anywhere in here not do that, because like clicking here shouldn't close that. Clicking here should. Okay, that's another thing for me to change. Probably globally. I probably don't ever want to close a pop-up if I click in the pop-up. Only outside, right? Anyway, yeah, so I discovered something kind of horrifying with my UI code while I was working on this. It manifested as this little slider I was dragging, going 1 pixel down below this and 1 pixel up above this, when all of my math told me it should not have been doing that. But then I discovered that I was using the roundf function in the C standard library, which rounds away from 0 for both positive and negative numbers. So I had to replace all of my number rounding and all my UI code, which is kind of a lot, with my own round function that always rounds up on exact halves. So yeah, turn over a rock and sometimes you find weird, horrifying stuff like that. I replaced it. It all looks fine, so theoretically my number rounding should be more stable now. Interesting. So I'm sampling the cursor position at a higher resolution than I'm outputting this to the screen. So I can actually move my cursor, not see that slider change by pixel, but do see the hex value change. That's all fine. Cool. All right, so yeah, I had a lot of fun with this little dialogue. There's a little more to do with it. I'm happy with how this color picker turned out. Just rendering like this quad was surprisingly more complicated than I expected, just because of the way colors interpolate between all the corners. I couldn't just draw a quad with like black, black, white, red, because that would split up into 2 triangles where it's like black, white, red, black, black, red, and there'd be a seam down the middle. So I had to actually draw a one quad, red at the top, white at the bottom, then another one with opaque black at the left, transparent black at the right, to get this to show up right. All these little technical things. It's a lot of fun. I like tinkering with this stuff. I like making tools. Sometimes I'm probably better at making tools than actually using them to make stuff with them. But it's a lot of fun. Anyway, yeah, so scenario editor, stuff's happening. I'm still working on my audio generator code. It's gotten somewhere. It's further along than it was, but there's more research needed. That rabbit hole is very deep, so not much more to talk about that yet. I'll have it eventually when it's all up and running. Anyway, yeah, so this was fun. See you next time with editor further along, hopefully.